Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Bow Guide. I've been trying to fully understand the ins and outs of bow to be able to create a guide that covers everything for anyone wanting to pick up the bow and have the best grasp of it. Now, this will be a lengthy video explaining every move available to the bow, how and when to use them, and how you want to be weaving it all together to get the most out of this weapon. Timestamps are, of course, available for you as needed. Now, let's start with the very basics of the bow. The bow has charge levels that you can increase through various moves. The higher your charge level, the more arrows you shoot out with your various bow attacks. Now let's go through those attacks. First up, we have charge shot. You just need to stand still and aim with L2 and R2 to increase your charge level. You can also repeatedly shoot your bow to increase your charge level, and this is going to be the fastest way to get maximum charge. Your basic bow attack that you shoot with L2 and R2 will shoot 1 arrow at charge level 1, 2 arrows at charge level 2, and 3 arrows at charge level 3. Very simple. 1 equals 1, 2 equals 2. It's so easy math, even I can do it. Now, after you reach that charge level 3, if you start that all over again, you're going to go back down to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's just going to be like that constantly. But if you want to keep your maximum charge level going, then you want to use charging sidestep. This is done by holding L2 and X to dodge in the direction of your choosing. This will maintain your charge levels to shoot those max amount of arrows and also increase them after you get going. You're free to dodge as much as your stamina allows to keep those juicy charges up. Now, speaking of stamina, let's talk about how you can get it back. Now, if you happen to perfectly dodge an enemy's attack with this charging sidestep, L2 and X, it will turn into discerning dodge instead. This will iframe the monster's attack, fill some of your trickshot gauge, which we will explain later, replenish your stamina, and instantly charge your bow to charge level 3. Which is like, what the hell, man? Now you know the basics of aiming and shooting your bow with L2 and R2 as well as the charge levels. Let's go over your circle attack moves that I like to call your shotgun moves because they're widespread, close range kind of shots that just shoot lots of arrows. First up, we have quick shot. You do this by just pressing circle, which shoots out a quick spread of 3 arrows which have very short range. The plus side of this move is that it uses no stamina, which is great for using when you need to let your stamina recharge, but it also combos really nicely into our other moves. Power shot is your next circle move, which you can do right after a charge shot, quick shot, or charging sidestep. This move is affected by your bow charge level and will shoot 3 arrows at charge level 1, 4 arrows at charge level 2, and 5 arrows at charge level 3. Your final circle move is called power volley, and this can only be done after a power shot. And this does a lot more damage, but it is quite a long animation, so please be careful when choosing when to use this one. This move is also affected by charge level of your bow, with 4 arrows being shot at charge level 1, 5 arrows at level 2, and 6 arrows at level 3. Now, here is an example of putting all of these moves into practice because I'm sure you're like, what the fudge? Shooting the bow to increase the charge level, weaving in those power shots and power volleys, dodging with our charging sidestep to maintain the charge levels, and then rinse and repeat. With the WILDS bow, you really will benefit from putting yourself into close range with monsters and trying to perfect dodge their moves so you can continue using charging sidestep and maintain that maximum bow charge. Now let's talk about the trick shot gauge because this is another part of the bow that greatly benefits from pulling off perfect dodges. Trick shot gauge is the blue bar that has 3 segments within it. This bar is your resource to use tracer arrows and also your arrow coatings. Using a tracer arrow or applying a coating will deplete one of the trick shot gauge segments. You can also apply coatings without a fully charged trick shot segment. It will just load less than the maximum of 8 coatings, but we'll get into the details of coatings in a little bit. To gain your trick shot gauge back, you can simply hold R2, which will slowly charge it. Landing hits on monsters will also charge it. Now, this includes the multi-hits. When you're like piercing through the monster, every one of those hits will fill your gauge. So there's going to be times where you get a ton of gauge very, very, very quickly. But the other way that you can charge your trickshot gauge is by performing perfect dodges against monster attacks. Now let's go into the things that you can use your trickshot gauge for in detail, starting with the tracer arrows. You shoot these arrows by holding R2 and square. This will stick the monster with an arrow that makes all other arrows track to the tracer arrow. After enough damage is done to the tracer arrow with your other attacks homing into it, the tracer will explode, doing a burst of damage. Charging the tracer shot before shooting it into the monster will make that final explosion bigger. The tracer not only makes all arrows track to it, but it also makes every bow move be at full charge level no matter what. So your charge shot will always be 3 arrows, your power shot will always be 5 arrows, etc. Huge, insane. You have tracking arrows and they're always the maximum charge, no matter if you are fully charged or not. Now, a move I really like doing with tracer arrow is the flying swallow shot. That is performed by doing a charging sidestep with the L2 and X and then pressing triangle right after. This has your hunter leap into the air in any direction of your choosing. And this move is affected by charge level of your bow, shooting 3 arrows at level 1, 4 arrows at level 2, and 5 arrows at charge level 3. However, using flying swallow shot will reset your charge level, no matter what. You can't dodge right after it and keep that level. It resets it completely. And this is why I like using it with the tracer shot, because I can spam flying swallow shots to always shoot out 5 arrows. It's very safe to use because it's a mobile move, and it's performed after a dodge, so if you do happen to perfectly dodge a monster attack, you get all that stamina back and you can just keep jumping around. It also looks really cool and makes me feel like an anime character, and is probably the closest we get to Monster Hunter Rise aerial aim bow, so I want to do it all the time. Now, from my testing, there is actually like a good solid reason to use it besides looking cool. I believe that it is the fastest way to apply a status effect because the move is very fast, and with that tracer in the monster, it will always shoot out 5 arrows. So if you're unfamiliar with the way that bow works, you are more likely to apply a status to a monster if you're hitting it with more arrows. It just makes sense, right? Like if I shoot 5 poison arrows at you, it's probably going to hurt more than if I shoot 1 poison arrow at you. It just makes sense. And this move is so freaking fast. In the beta, it takes about 3 flying swallow shots to apply poison, which means you're also only using 3 poison coatings, which is awesome. Now, speaking of coatings, let's jump into how those work. To select the coating, you press L1 and X or triangle, depending on if you want to scroll up or down your coating list. And then you press triangle to apply the coating. Applying a coating will use 1 segment of your trick shot gauge and will load 8 coatings onto your arrows. If you do not have a full trick shot gauge segment, it will load less than 8 using whatever it can from the available charged trick shot gauge. Now, if you happen to load in the wrong coating, say you load poison coating, for example, when you wanted to do power coating, you can just load in power coating and it won't use any extra gauge. It will just use the original amount that you used to load the poison coating. Now you can see why flying swallow shot is so nice, because if I'm only using 3 out of my 8 poison coatings, I can switch to power coatings and I still have 5 available to me. So it's really, really good bang for your buck, I think. Now, if you do happen to load a coating onto your arrows when you don't want to use your trick shot gauge for coatings at all, say, for example, you only have 1 gauge and you want to use a tracer arrow instead, you can go to the unequip option in your coatings menu, the same way with the L1 and the X and triangle, and get that trick shot gauge refunded entirely. Now, there's a bunch of different coatings in Monster Hunter Wilds. Power coating increases the damage of your arrows, I think, by about 50%. Close range coating increases arrow damage but reduces their range. Piercing coating allows all arrows to pierce through the monsters. Very exciting. Can't wait to do that. Poison coating inflicts poison, which will do damage over time. Paralysis coating will inflict paralysis, causing the monster to not be able to move for a short time. Sleep coating will put the monster to sleep. Blast coating will apply blast, causing a big burst of damage, and exhaust coating will make all your arrows inflict stun and exhaust easier. Different bows will have access to different types of coatings, so choose based on the target monster's weakness. Now, we are almost at the end of the moves, and then I can tell you how to use all of this together. Trust me, it will make sense. Just stick with me. Now let's start with arc shot. Arc shot is the other move that Bo has that causes arrows to stick into the monster, and this is performed by holding L2 and R2 with circle. These arrows are called fuse arrows and won't cause your bow moves to track to them, but they can be blown up in a few different ways. Holding the arc shot down to charge it does cause the individual arrows raining down to do more damage, and it also increases the size of the area of effect, so you can catch more of the monster with them. Now, you can blow up these fuse arrows caused by arc shots with 3 moves in the bow's kit. The first being Dragon Piercer. This is performed by pressing triangle and circle together and will shoot an arrow through the monster's body. This will blow up any fuse arrow it comes into contact with, and it will also blow up your tracer arrow. Now, if you just press triangle and circle to do the Dragon Piercer, it will be quite a slow move, but do pretty solid damage. However, if you press triangle and circle after a combo of any of the moves that we have gone over, minus Flying Swallow Shot, you will do what's called an instant Dragon Piercer, which is much faster, but will do slightly less damage. I still find this to probably be the most useful way of using Dragon Piercer because it's easier to use and it's gonna blow up all those fuse arrows, which is really the main reason that I'm using it. The other way to blow up these fuse arrows is with 1,000 Dragons. You perform this by pressing R2 plus triangle and circle. This will always shoot 6 arrows no matter what. Will trigger fuse arrows laid into the monster via your arc shot, and will blow up your tracer arrow. Now, this is a very close range move unless you're aiming at a tracer arrow, so take advantage of that how you will. Now, keep in mind that both Dragon Piercer and 1,000 Dragons does destroy your tracer arrow. Like, it just gets rid of it. And as we discussed, tracer arrows make you do more damage because you are shooting more arrows at the target when you're shooting at a tracer arrow. So you don't want to be destroying this right away. You don't want to use a whole section of your trickshot gauge and then immediately destroy the tracer arrow. You don't want to do that. So I highly recommend that you weave these in at the end of your combos. So you do your whole regular thing, you charge it up, you do charging sidestep, you're doing power shots, power volleys, and then you end with a Dragon Piercer or 1,000 Dragons so that you're still getting the full use of that tracer shot. Now, finally, we have the Focus Strike Hailstorm. This is performed by pressing L2 and R1, and this will make your hunter aim at the monster, locking onto any fuse arrows, tracer arrows, or wounds. As you target these things, you will notice a triangle filling up in 3 sections. If you let lock on complete to those 3 full sections, you'll fire more arrows and have better tracking towards them. If you fill up 2 sections, you'll have less arrows and tracking. 1 section, even less arrows and tracking. You can use this to blow up any of those fuse arrows or tracer arrows. Now, if you use Focus Strike Hailstorm against a wound, your hunter will automatically go into a Dragon Piercer right after the shot has completed post lock on. So if you're like, sometimes I use my focus attack and I don't understand why sometimes I do that follow-up attack and it just does it and I don't get it. It's because you're locking onto a wound. You have to lock onto a wound to make that happen. I was confused when I first played it at Capcom 2. I was very confused, but now you know. Fun fact, you don't need to aim at the wound with your follow-up Dragon Piercer in order to pop it. The Hailstorm lock-on is enough. So what I tend to do is if a monster has wounds created, I'll shower them with arc shot arrows, lock onto the wound and the arrows, and then use the Dragon Piercer to follow up to blow up any of those remaining fuse arrows on the monster. Now, I did say that you get the most damage by completing that full lock-on with Hailstorm, but there are some situations where you don't want to wait the full length. One of those is after Ray Dow does one of his railgun attacks, he creates a weak spot on his face. Now, you won't usually have enough time to let the full lock-on happen, so going for that level 1 lock-on, maybe level 2, is the way to go to take advantage of those very short windows. Chatacabra does it when he sticks his tongue out, Balahara does it when he spits the water thing at you. A lot of these monsters are creating their own kind of weak spots, and you don't want to fully lock on for a lot of them because they're really, really, really fast. So those are all the bow moves, except for mounting, which you can only do with bow pretty much from jumping off of Sacred onto the monster, but it's worth it because the dismount looks frickin' sick. Oh, and a fun little tip is you can actually use your slinger ammo with your bow out by holding L2 and pressing the left stick. Okay, now how the fudge do you use this all together? I've already been talking for like 50 hours. Okay, so let's go over the very basic principle of making good use of bow. You want to always have a tracer active in the monster and always have a power coating loaded. Of course, if you aren't currently trying to afflict the monster with a status effect. Now, we aren't all perfect god gamers, so there will be some times that we aren't keeping this up perfectly, but this is just the goal. In order to have enough trick shot gauge to do this, you need to be putting yourself in harm's way to perfect dodge monster attacks. If you don't, you won't be able to consistently keep up tracer arrows as well as power coating. You won't have enough stamina to keep up your charge level, and it's just gonna be a bad time. A bow player without stamina is a very sad bow player. If you do, however, find that you have to choose between a power coating or a tracer arrow, I say go with the tracer arrow because it drastically increases your damage and it is guaranteed to have every arrow hit the monster, even if you're using the very close range attacks, even if your aim is not perfect. So here's an example of all of this. Apply tracer, apply coating, and then go between charge shots, power volleys, and charging sidestep to maintain maximum charge. When the tracer blows up, you start that rotation all over again. If you can just get used to doing that, managing your stamina, managing your trick shot gauge, you will be in a really good spot because I think all of this is very overwhelming to begin with because there's a lot that you're having to manage to just keep your damage up. Now, when a wound has been formed, this is when I start to lay down the arc shots, getting arrows stuck into the monster to prepare for locking on with Hailstorm and doing the big old damage. Now, something you may notice with bow quite quickly is that you're not really creating wounds that often. From what I found, bows seem to create wounds via big damage with that tracer arrow. So the more complicated version of this that I've been trying to get down more often now is to load the tracer arrow, load a power coating, go through the combos we just explained, and end with 1,000 dragons to blow that tracer arrow up. The goal here is to end the tracer arrow's life with the biggest bang for our buck. I also find that this definitely creates wounds much faster, and wounds are great because you can use them to interrupt monster attacks, stop the monster from running away, and getting pretty free dragon piercers on the monster by blowing up all of those juicy arrows. Now, cutting tails has always been very hard in Monster Hunter. In Wild, with your base bow kit, it is very difficult. Not impossible, but it is difficult. But the way that I've been able to do it is by putting this all together, creating a lot of wounds, getting lots of free dragon piercers, putting those arc shots on tails and blowing those up. So it is possible. I think piercing coating will be the way to deal with getting rid of tails with bow if you don't want to switch to a different weapon to just do it a lot easier, but I can't currently test that. I believe. We cut the tail! We did it! Oh, I really hope that my explanations and the gameplay, seeing it all in practice, that this makes sense to you guys. It's a really high actions per minute playstyle. Like legit, my hands hurt. When I played Rise, my hands did hurt because same thing. And I would say that Wild's bow is somewhere between World and Rise in terms of like how much you're doing at any given time. It's like constant. It's constant management and movement and lots of buttons. Because those 8 coatings do not last very long with how fast bow shoots. So just being on top of everything constantly, having enough stamina, enough gauge to pull it all off can be overwhelming. But just start with that very basic concept that we talked about. Add a tracer, add a coating, do your dancing, blow up the tracer, and start again. If you can do that and you get to managing it really well, you will be on your way to being a fine bow player. But Wild's bow is so incredibly satisfying to learn. You see your damage shoot through the roof. Like you start off and you're like, this damage is not very good. And then you start doing all of this and you're like, never freaking mind. It's actually really good. So it's a really fun weapon to master. I think it's easy to get into, but mastering it is there's a lot of depth there. Now, when we can finally get our hands on all the skills possible for armor and weapons, I absolutely want to make a jumping damage bow build and spam that leaping swallow shot because it's my favorite move and I don't care if it's going to be the most optimal thing. I will make a build around it and it will be banging. Now, if any of you bow players out there have any other tips, please do leave them in the comment section. We can create the best Wilds bow players to ever live. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I really hope that this helped you. If it did, please do consider leaving a like, and I will see you guys later. Bye.